Billy Holtz, Michael Burgess, among others. And so words, written words, spoken words, and the place beyond written or spoken words, where the words come from that we don't understand, but we're part of it, we're inside of it, and we feel it and it comes through, it flows through. Beyond the writing, beyond the spoken word, where we get that magic, it happens. It happens in the bookshop when somebody just walks in and says something about a book or an idea that pops into their head, and then that leads to a conversation and magic happens, and it starts with somebody who's just somebody walking through the bookshop. And a lot of times I'm preoccupied and I'm over there writing something or doing something, and then I'm reminded, wow, we're here. We're here, and we're part of something that is so much bigger and so much more amazing than we are, and it's just unfathomable. And yet it wants to be fathomed, and so we try. So I think it's appropriate to start with a poet and a poem. I've asked Tricia Gates Brown if she'd be willing to read something that she wrote that I think is appropriate to the occasion, and she graciously accepted to do it. So, Tricia Gates Brown, folks.
How is the sound? Do you hear me? Okay. This poem is called Resilience. Each summer, woods threaten to take this place. Salmonberry, elder, the Sasquatch mittens of Devil's Club, encroach on the patch around our house, then swallow it whole. We have never had the wild and cloying cucumber, but there he is, showing out of nowhere, like sea scum, algae blooms, crops of a warmer earth. On this misty day, the flora don patinas of brilliant resilience, like they dare us try to stop them. Same as we did in our 20s, when fluids coursed through and we toiled and reached, and our dreams were a bow that shot us every moment, every day, to the final power. Thank you.
That's beautiful, Tricia. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Now you done it. You conjured up old Henry Stamford, do you know?
It's Henry.
Wag it and shag it and you can't pick it up. Well, haul it out and drag it. Give me some choker scissors. Give me a turn hook. I need me a rigging slinger. How about a yard operator? We're going to whip this green bitch, I'm telling you, into a life worth living. You! Oh, right. My God. Look at what the tide has brung to us. We ain't seen this many clowns since it was the circus train that jumped the tracks in Coos Bay. You know what they done? They brought all of them jumbled up clowns up to Wakanda to stay at the hospital, you know. Well, then they liked it so well in that town they decided to stay. Well, they started crossbreeding with our own clowns in that kind of place. A lot about that place, don't you think? Oh, what the hell time was 3:40 in the morning? Leland, get on up, boy. What you doing in there? Playing with his fiddle. You come to Jesus, God Almighty. We got to make a choke set out of you, boy. We're going to make a high-balling, hill-climbing, prime cut of manhood off you before the week's out. At least we're going to try. Well, I don't know. Give me some choker setters. You give me some landing bucks and some whistle punks, and by God, we'll whip this green bitch. Don't you ever give it an inch. 'cause she'll take a mile. That's all I
That was kick-ass. John Taylor. Is this stopped working now?
Yeah, what happened? Sound guy?
Put a quarter in.
Travis. Sound
John Taylor, the founder of Jupiter's Books.
Well, I got to tell you, about 25 years ago, it was one of those days we're famous for. There was bullets and silverware coming out of the sky, and I thought I was going to go to work. So I took my truck out onto Highway 101, and I was supposed to turn at Avenue U in Seaside to go to the Cove, and the truck wouldn't turn. So I sloshed on past the relief pitcher, and then I sloshed on past Highway 26, and the truck willingly turned into Cannon Beach. And I wasn't quite sure what was going on, but to make a long story short, I kind of hopped around Cannon Beach most of the day, and pretty much by the time the day was over with, I met Mary Lou McCauley, who was sitting right here, by the way, and I decided to buy a bookstore. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but it just seemed like it'd be kind of fun, and it was. So I had it for 3.5 years, and it was three and a half of the best years of my life. And I had an employee named Billy Pulse, who always said, "John, if you ever want to sell this place, please." And so the day came, and I thought, yeah, all right, Billy. And he took it over, and it's kind of gone through, I think, a nice progression of people. To keep it going, all of us got to be idealists, you know, to make something like this happen, or even be involved in it, because it's hard to make any money out of a little place like this. But anyway, that's my story about Jupiter Books. I've always kind of liked the accidental quality of waking up one day and ended up with a bookstore.
Matt Love, are you up next?
I am.
Okay. Matt Love, what can be said about Matt Love? He uses the word impresario to describe Billy Holtz, and I think it also actually applies to you, Matt. You do a great job, and thank you for your collaboration with this event. Matt has authored how many books now, Matt? 12. And one of them, sometimes a great movie. So I think on the poster I called you the curator of Kesey and culture, which I think is apropos. And he's going to introduce the novel, talk a little about the history. Matt Love.
I just turned 50 and I can't see anything, so glasses come on. I've been around the Kesey thing for a long time, but I have never seen anything more cool than what I just saw right there, a Henry Stamper impersonator. Give a hand back there for that. I want to thank Watt for staging this and everybody who came out tonight. We've got some interesting people in the audience, and that always makes a great event. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the introduction, and then we'll get into the program tonight. Viking Press published 27-year-old Ken Kesey's debut novel, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, in 1962 to widespread critical acclaim. Kesey had graduated from Springfield High School at the University of Oregon and gone on to Stanford to enroll in a creative writing program. Perhaps prior to the publication of Nest and in its immediate aftermath, Kesey began envisioning a novel about logging set in the Oregon coast woods. He had spent a lot of time at the coast driving Highway 126 from Eugene and passed a large house on an island in the Siuslaw River near Florence that struck a chord with him. This house was in the middle of a river. In what is generally thought to be the first inkling of Sometimes a Great Notion, Kesey wrote. So this was just sort of the treatment that he began to think about the novel. Most of the men who take their lives up in the northern logging camps come to be content with leaving a piece behind every season. A finger lopped off last year, 6 square inches of thigh this season, maybe an eye next year, as if only it was fair to leave the wood something in trade for the timber being taken away. That's the first recorded instance of him thinking about this novel. Later, he wrote 3 short treatment or fragments called Spring Rain that eventually culminated in Sometimes a Great Notion. The first sentence of each one reads, "Suddenly rain is falling. The rain fell," number 2, "the rain fell splitting and hissing through the great stacked ranks of pine needles." Number 3, "the rain fell." Finally, in 1960, love the sentence, "the rain fell." Perfect. Don't need any adornment with that. In 1964, Viking Press published a 600-page Sometimes a Great Notion, and the book began like this. Along the western slopes of the Oregon coastal range, come look. The hysterical crashing of tributaries as they merge into the Wakanda-Aga River. So you see 3 developments of the book. When Sometimes a Great Notion was released in 1964, it received mixed reviews. A New York Times critic wrote, "This monstrous book is the most insufferably pretentious and the most totally tiresome novel I've had to read in many years." A critic at the Saturday Review wrote, "Kesey has told a fascinating story in a fascinating way." The summer of 1964 also saw the Ken Kesey and Mary Prankster cross-country bus trip to New York to visit the World's Fair, meet Timothy Leary and the East Coast wing of Acid, and launch the novel in the literary capital of the country. Journalist Tom Wolfe later immortalized this journey in The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, and wrote that Kesey and company were on a mission to, quote, "drive some fire up the clammy rectum of American life." Amen to that. Wolfe also wrote about Kesey. He had Jack London, Martin Eaton searching hick, the hick with intellectual yearnings written all over him. He was from Oregon. Who the hell was from Oregon? And had an Oregon country drawl and too many muscles and calluses on his hands and his brow furrowed when he was thinking hard, and it was perfect. In an interview, Paul Newman said he bought the rights, film rights to Sometimes a Great Notion, after reading the famous drowning under the log scene in the galleys before publication came out. That would have been in 1964. A friend of Ken Kesey's claimed the inspiration for the famous drowning scene derived from a childhood incident where Kesey and his cousin were rafting a fork of the Mackenzie River during high flows, and the raft became snagged on a downed tree and submerged it partly underwater. So they almost drowned as the water was going up and back, up and back. They eventually freed themselves and floated away. Newman produced and starred and directed in the cinematic adaptation of Sometimes a Great Notion the summer of 1970. It was shot in and around Newport and released on Christmas Day, 1971. We have a cast member right here. Her name is Sherry. She was in the volleyball, the Fogarty Beach scene where they ran out of water and it was 100 degrees and she drank beer and got drunk. First time. Let's give her a hand for that. And she had me sign her VHS copy of the movie, which was great. Now, the movie came out, and I wrote a book about it, and it tanked across the country. It just didn't do well. But was received warmly here in Oregon, and of course has since become a cult hit, particularly in logging communities. You haven't lived till you watch Sometimes a Great Notion in Coos Bay. Okay? And, you know, the movie is okay, I guess, but it doesn't really do justice to the novel. How could it? But I did interview the screenwriter, John Gay, who is still alive. I think he's like 98 now. And he told me, we got it all wrong. It should have been a mini-series. shot during the time when the novel is set, which is in the fall when the first big rain slams into the coast. And Kesey said, it's gone on, it started and it's going to go on for 6 more months. And those of you that live here know what I'm talking about, right? Now, I wrote the book, Sometimes a Great Movie, and then my own book called Of Walking in Rain, which was directly inspired by Sometimes a Great Notion. And I've traveled around the state, all over the state, promoting these books, and I've met probably more Kesey fanatics than anybody in Oregon. And they are an interesting lot. And I know there are some here in this audience right now. They have a religious connection to this book. I met a Newport fisherman. He's read it 17 times. It's the only book he ever reads. He annotates it. It has become a Bible for many people in the Pacific Northwest. And they're not even readers. This is the only book they read. They've come to it through some supernatural way, and then they continue to read it over and over again. And I've met dozens of them, and I'm sure they're out here tonight, and we've got a great program, and I just want to thank Watt, and I had the pleasure of meeting Billy Holtz here, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, and he published me in the Upper Left Edge, which we're resurrecting. Watt has resurrected tonight. The print run of Upper Left Edge is coming back. That's a huge event in the North Oregon coast, and we've got some great things going. So that's a little introduction to the novel, so thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Nancy Slavin. Nancy Slavin has written the book Moorings, among other things. It's a wonderful book. We have some copies in the bookshop. Nancy was kind enough to contribute a piece for the Upper Left Edge, which I will be passing out later, a new printed copy of the Upper Left Edge. It's a wonderful piece, and she has agreed to read it tonight. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah.
All right, let's get this clear. I'm dedicating this to Michael Burgess. He and I we're colleagues at Tillamook Bay Community College, and we're adjuncts, instructors. But this was like a serendipitous deal, right? I came in here to sell Watson books, which I really appreciate, and I certainly support our local independent bookstores, of which there's still one in Tillamook County and a few in Clatsop County. And he told me Matt came in and they had the conversation, and I was like, of course, about that, and would you write a piece? I'm like, well, I might write something about the women in the book, because I just came back from doing today. I'm a little hoarse. I've been doing a 7-hour oppression awareness training about the way that, people get represented in our culture. And so, anyway, I've read the book, and I love the book. I'm a literature teacher, and I love the book. And I now live in Oregon, so you kind of have to. But I had to think a little bit about how the women are represented. And really, this was a serendipitous thing. What was that word Watt used? That this just sort of came to me. So I'm not even sure I wrote it. I'm not even sure what I wrote, so I'm going to read it. The women are the river. The meandering, silent river, the quiet riffles near the bank where a severed arm raises a finger to the sky. The men are everything else. Protagonists, loggers, action, jobs, bluster, egos, wind, and rain slanting down from low gray skies. Yet, you must always keep your eye on the water, for the river she rises. Kesey's Sometimes a Great Notion is a quintessential Northwest Oregon book. The book should be required reading if you're going to move to the Oregon coast, and perhaps, with any luck, it'll persuade you not to move. Coastal people can be mean, after all. They never give an inch. They don't want unions. They want what they want when they want it. Every longtime local is a stamper. My actual life neighbors are the trucking version of the Stamper family, complete with women dying by their own hand and a lineage of infighting sons and pregnant women. If only we lived next to a river, those poor young girls could get something done. I don't think many critics would argue Kesey was a feminist. and in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, his portrayal of Nurse Ratched made me think surely he's a misogynist. I give a little critical analysis in there I'm not going to read. But one critic said that Cuckoo's Nest... Oh, cool. All right, count it right. Okay. All right, so I'm not alone in that thought. The article's called Fixing Men, Castration, Impotence, and Masculinity in Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was published in the Journal of Men's Studies. Read it. The critic, Michael Malloy, argues the novel is a representative of post-World War II's fundamental terror of perceived feminization. I think it's pretty accurate. When an interviewer once asked Kesey, "What do you see as evil in the world and how do you depict it?" Kesey replied, "In my novels and stories, evil is always the thing that seems to control." In Cuckoo's Nest, clearly, evil is what the narrator of the novel calls the combine, the mechanistic, systemically oppressive society, and Nurse Ratched is its minion, seen both by readers and characters as an evil woman. Notion, however, is a more complicated novel than Cuckoo's Nest. The story, long and twisted, is told in a highly original, brilliant structure, which can't be called flashbacks exactly, but perhaps more accurately could be called the back slews, with parenthetical and italicized passages revealing the deep conflicts that the novel carries forward, that carry the novel forward. The main action, that the stampers won't unionize and they're going to deliver their logs downstream, community be damned, is not quite interesting enough to carry the novel forward, which is why the movie version of Notion failed. It threw out the deep undercurrents. Never throw out the women, see? These narrative backslews are where the women are, hiding in the reeds, hollowed out with loneliness, dark and unhappy. But these women affect the men deep in their psyches. The women have power, like the river has power. They are the current on which the narrative rides. Kesey knew the real conflict in Notion is with the river. In the interview, Kesey says that evil in Notion is the symbol of the river, eating away, leveling, trying to make that town the same. The river is the controlling force. The family is battling. Mother Nature throws off the forces that try to control her. It is that feminized power, not wanting to be controlled, that undercuts the bank, dirt clod by dirt clod. When young Hank wanted to keep the bobcat kittens as pets, the river calves off the bank and the kittens fall into the river and drown. And later, Hank and Lee match wills and egos over Vivian, holder of the Stampers Men's scrapbook history and the one who leaves that history behind. Vivian and Myra before her, and even the paragraph that describes Hank's biological mother, who got up one morning, did the washing, and died, are the same as the river, throwing off the Stamper men who try to control them. Some readers might see a negation of women and sometimes a great notion, but I say the women are not victims, but the agents of their own power, even if they die suddenly or by jumping off a building. They make their choices, and the whole Stamper legacy balances on a precarious brink because of them. By the time Vivian leaves Wakanaga Valley, she heads for what Kesey calls a dark future, but one in which she is not being controlled. Even Kesey conceded how women affected him. Quote, "Old feminism, women's lib, had something to do with Vivian's choice to leave, but I didn't know it at the time. Like I said, she's rising."
And Nancy's writing is so good that it really bears reading again. And you can read it in the upper left edge, so please do when it comes out. I was amazed, Nancy, when, there were a number of folks that I asked to contribute, if they would be willing to contribute something to the upper left edge. Individually, when conversations came up like Nancy was talking about. And this is a perspective that's vital with so many different works, and especially, I think, this one. And Nancy, you were so quick in getting that together. I was blown away. absolutely blown away. Thank you. So, happenstance. Last week, was it? Saturday. A gentleman, gentleman and his spouse walk in the door, a couple, and they're looking at books, and they go over and they pick up a book. What was the first book that you picked up?
Don Barry's.
Yes.
To Build a Ship.
To Build a Ship, Don Barry. And so we talked about Don Barry a little bit, and then went on to something else, and then just about left the store. And then came over and picked up a copy of Ricochet River, and said, "Oh yeah, these copies really hold together really well. I was going to get a couple of them, because some of the other publications, they don't really hold together as well, because of different editions, I said, "Are you Robin Cody?" He said, "Yeah." And so that led to a conversation just last Saturday, and a conversation that getting ready for this event, and I'm delighted that Robin is with us tonight. Author of Ricochet River and Journey to the Summer's Voyage. Voyage to the Summer Sun, and a book of his nonfiction. We have a couple of copies of his nonfiction and a variety of other things. I know. Wrote a wonderful piece in the Oregonian in memoriam for Ken Kesey, which I had the honor to read again. And so let's welcome. It's our honor to have Robin Cody here with us tonight.
Oh man, what? It's my honor to be here, and it was serendipitous. We just saw the book in the window that my copy of had disappeared from the shelves, and so it was a Don Barry book, and Watt invited me to be here, and I'm just really pleased to do that. My copy, this is actually that's the third version that I've gone through of Sometimes a Great Notion, all in studying the craft of writing. And it happened that when my book, Ricochet River, first came out, Kesey and Ken Babbs were seated at the Oregon Historical Society right next to me and my Ricochet River, and Ken had, it looked like a fisherman's tackle box full of different colored magic markers, and to write his signature he would use 3 different colors, and it would take him 30 seconds, and he was wearing a cowboy hat where the hat band was a rattlesnake coming out, and it took him so much time that the crowds gathered around Kesey, swallowed me up. The Oregonian photographer came in from the side, pushed me aside, and got the profile writing of Kesey. And I've never seen anybody have so much fun. He and Babs, drinking wine, of course, at a book signing. The other time I overlapped with Kesey was in the movie version of Ricochet River. We were shooting in Pleasant Hill, his town. I'm the umpire in the book. Kesey is the announcer at the baseball game, and it takes half a day to shoot, to get ready to our part. And so we're sitting in the dugout, talking, getting to know each other. I'm not sure later he would even know who I am, but the gopher, the woman who's in charge of taking care of people, came by and said, "What could I do? What could I do for you people? Can I get you anything?" And Kesey said, "A bottle of gin." And she said, "Oh, ha, ha, ha." And Kesey laid those blue eyes on her, and she went, I don't know where she went, but she came back with the bottle of gin. He was just that life-loving, booze-loving character that I always admired. Matt has already mentioned that New York publishers didn't get it. On the obituary, which was lengthy in the New York Times, all of the attention was on electric Kool-Aid acid test and the merry pranksters, and it was almost an afterthought that this tribute to Kesey even mentioned Sometimes a Great Notion. So I was furious. Here's the best guy, the best writer of our time, and I wrote an in memoriam for the Oregonian, and that's what I'm going to read pieces of tonight. It's too long. It's too angry and long. But here are parts of it. If the house caught fire tomorrow, the first book I'd grab would be that dog-eared, water-stained, margin-scribbled copy of Sometimes a Great Notion. It's the best big book we have. No Northwest writer before or since has outdone Kesey's massive novel, which strikes to the very soul of what it means to live here. It's a huge work, a book that doesn't invite you in, a book that's better the second and third time through, a book that is wildly experimental in craft, but also, surprise, good old-fashioned literary classic. The better the book, of course, the harder to say what it's about. What we have here is a saga of 4 generations of the Stamper family, stubborn loggers scrambling for a foothold on the Oregon coast. The rugged individualists of frontier history are strike-breaking woodsmen now as civilization closes in. More to the point, it's a book about place. To the extent that nobility is achieved or heartbreak rendered, it happens in relation to the big woods country and wild rivers and raw landscape that used to, and in some places still does, define the Pacific Northwest. In the context of American frontier literature, Kesey's is the next best book after Huckleberry Finn. Hannibal, Missouri, of course, was the Northwest in 1890. Huck Finn earlier could light out for the territory when things got tight. But in geography as well as in literature, we are smack up against it. This is the territory. There's nowhere west to go. Waterways and landscapes are so central to Kesey's storytelling that nature becomes a character, even the main character. Place is alive. Before we even meet a person, we hear a watershed, as Matt read that opening sentence. Soon we get the earth sprouting malignant plants, rain rusting a barrel of nails overnight, and the river sucking at the foundation of the Stamper house. Surf laps at a car. A sand dune, yikes, swallows Leland. A falling limb dismembers Hank. A newly felled tree pins Joe Ben under a rising tide. Nature here is a tough customer. Rich stuff, this man against nature theme. And if it were just that, if it were just never give an inch, we'd still have a good man in nature story. But Kesey grapples with much more than that. I'm skipping parts of this as we go, but nature is also a healer in sometimes a great notion. Nature nurtures as well. Nature cradles as well as assaults. Kesey understands the continuous scripture of rivers. The book opens with the hysterical crashing of tributaries merging into his fictional Wakanda-Auga River. And it ends in the same broad river with Hank delivering the goods on the surging tide. And in between, the river not only separates the Stamper place from town, but also carries the narrative line. Joe Ben's empathy for wild geese and small animals is why we care so much, why we are left breathless at his drowning. Hank's bell rings at the whisper of wind in the tall fir. When things get too tough, when things get too tight for Hank, he finds that place in the river where he can swim against the current and stay where he is. There's nowhere west to go. I get goosebumps at this stuff. It's not just me. A few years ago, the Seattle PI polled contemporary writers asking, what is the Northwest's all-time best book, fiction or not? Guess what led the field? It wasn't even close. Kesey's genius is that he managed to bridge the chasm between what we were as a people and what we are. In Hank Stamper, the logger who loves the woods, an archetypal schizoid character mirrors our own schizoid contemporary culture. We like to think of ourselves as the sons and daughters of pioneers, having just emerged from a clearing in the wilderness. But hey, come on. After damming the rivers and scalping the woods comes the dawning realization that we can conquer and control nature. We do so at our peril, destroying what we love the most about this place. So the nature buster as literary hero gives way to characters who learn from, take their cues from, an instructive natural world. Kesey got it both ways. And then came the elephant in the room. Kesey had accomplished all this before he was 30 years old. Following his frantic, inspired output came a string of forgettable books scattered over the next 35 years. His writing lost the old zip. He never again collared the manic energy and wild brilliance that had infused those first two books. To be sure, he directed that rascally energy in different directions, still jousting at convention, still railing at the system. But when Kesey a couple years ago took off in a replica of Further, that's the bus, Further, the vintage International Harvester school bus of the Merry Prankster fame, to tour England, it seemed to me somehow sad, like Willie Mays late in his sensational career, stumbling about center field for the Mets. Had he continued his writing in the same early vein, Kesey might have caught even New York's attention and become our one-name rep in the pantheon of American lit, like New England's Hawthorne, like the South's Faulkner. But if he had continued in the same pace, he'd have died at 36. The title of the big book, the title song of the big book is from Goodnight Irene. Sometimes I live in the country. Sometimes I live in the town. Sometimes I get a great notion to jump in the river and drown. Like I say, I get goosebumps. I can imagine Kesey's latter-day frustration at the idiots in New York who wanted more. So, Michelangelo, when are you going to paint another ceiling? Kesey had done it. He nailed it. With sometimes a great notion, Ken Kesey got it all.
Thank you, Robert.